So with this, we finish the last full week of Lent. This is the 5th week of Lent. Of course, starting next week, we have two of the same thing. We have the 6th week of Lent, but more commonly known as Holy Week. Of course, it begins with Palm Sunday and then continues through with Monday of Holy Week, Tuesday of Holy Week, Wednesday of Holy Week, and then we get into Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Saturday, and of course Easter. So keeping in mind that Lent actually ends at midnight on Wednesday, because then we end in the Triduum, which is Holy Thursday, Good Friday. So this is the week. This is the week where we're ending and we're looking forward to what's coming up next week. But what we're looking at today is from Jeremiah. This is a really popular or really powerful. I say powerful a lot. You probably noticed that. Really powerful passage, not necessarily popular, but powerful. And it's where this is a whole part of where Jeremiah is just acknowledging that his role as prophet is difficult. And it's been a painful experience. And so we look at this reading here from Jeremiah, and of course, we're going to look at it through the Catholic public domain version. Now, to really understand this, we want to go back to the context. And of course, we've talked about this before. The context is Jeremiah is preaching to the people of Judah, and they are refusing to listen, and they are rejecting him while they are engaged in idolatry and all the practices of idolatry. So the Lord is calling them back, and they're not listening. So here is this guy calling them to change their ways, and they're basically saying, sit down and shut up. And in doing so, the Lord is trying to strengthen Jeremiah, but at the same time, Jeremiah is talking about how painful this experience has been. So let's look at what he's talking about here, and it's actually only 3 verses. It's chapter 20, verse 10 to chapter 20, verse 13. He said, "For I heard the insults of many and terror all around. Persecute him, and let us persecute him, from all the men who had been at peace with me and who had kept watch by my side. If only there was some way that he might be deceived, and we might prevail against him and obtain vengeance from him." So what's happening there is, of course, that you have people, the old smiling at his face and stabbing him in the back, and they're calling him to be persecuted. And notice it's persecution. It's let's persecute him. Why do you persecute someone? You want to silence him. You want to silence his voice. Now, keep in mind that there were also false prophets. And the false prophets would say, oh, no, everything's fine, no matter what. You'd have all the signs that there's trouble ahead. And the false prophets would say, trouble? Nah, everything's fine. And the term used to describe the false prophet is peace and security. In other words, they'd be preaching peace and security. Everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. No, don't. What? You think there's a No, God's not unhappy with you. And would say that. And what's coming up is prosperity and everything's wonderful. And the Lord is not unhappy with you. And the people, knowing that they were not living the commandments as the Lord had called, they're following the ways of the pagans, and they're worshiping other gods, they would have known deep down inside that the false prophets were wrong, but they would want to listen to them, and then they would want to silence Jeremiah. So this is what's going on here. And so Jeremiah adds in this hope he has. But the Lord is with me like a strong warrior. For this reason, those who persecute me will fall, and they will be ineffective. They will be greatly confounded, for they have not understood the everlasting disgrace that will never be wiped away. And of course, he's talking about that they will suffer a punishment for their unfaithfulness and their evil that will not be forgotten. So, and it continues. And you, O Lord of hosts, the tester of the just, who sees the temperament and the heart, I beg you to let me see your vengeance upon them. We've discussed this passage before, and it is something that sometimes throws people off. Because you're turning around saying, well, we don't want to see vengeance. We don't want to see. But no, that is in the Bible. People who have committed evil against other people, those people who suffered at the evil want to see the evil people suffer. They want to experience the vengeance. And you might say, well, where is forgiveness in all this? And forgiveness is, I will not take my vengeance. I will leave vengeance to the Lord. So it doesn't mean that you want the person to get away with what they did. It is, vengeance is the Lord's, it is not mine. So then they're saying, but Lord, we want to see the vengeance upon you. And so we're seeing that with Jeremiah. He has suffered great evil. People have committed great evil against him. And he says that he wants to see them encounter the punishment due to them. A lot of people don't think that way. They don't think that this is what the church actually teaches. But it's an interesting combination that you have to see. Because, again, what do you want to see? You want to see some kind of justice happen, but you want it to be God's justice and not yours, because your justice is always going to fall back on you. But if it's God's justice, it's going to fall back on God, and it's going to be the most just form of justice. And that brings up something I think we can look at, because that's what it is. It's going to be justice as God sees it, not as we see it. But we also, one of the things I also have people talk to me about is the concept of hell. And you realize that many people who teach this concept that virtually everyone's going to hell and virtually just a very small amount of super good people are going to heaven do not reflect a true form of justice. That makes no sense. And God is the embodiment of justice. He is the most just. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense that someone would spend eternity in hell for missing Mass one Sunday, or even a series of Sundays, whereas, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if the person is really faithful, whereas someone who rejects God completely and shoots up a bank and all its customers gets almost the same punishment. And, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if God is just, then he is going to do the most just thing. But that is something we want to understand. So I always bring into question that whole aspect of hell. As a matter of fact, the church declares people say the church has never declared anyone in hell. No, that's not true. It's declared two people in hell: Judas Iscariot and Cain. But why are they in hell? They are in hell because they refuse to be forgiven. They can be forgiven, or they could have been forgiven, but they refuse. They live with this intense form of pride that they feel they can't possibly be forgiven for what they've done. And that's why they are in hell. So it isn't even God's vengeance that puts them there. It's their own refusal to be humble enough to accept God's forgiveness. So we look at that. We see this interesting verse where someone says, no, Lord, I want to see your vengeance. And I want to see it, it's saying, but it's still got to be God's vengeance. It is not, Lord, I'm going to take up my sword against my enemies, because that is clearly not what is allowed. But there is that call to see justice happen. I'm trying to think of maybe a situation where I've experienced it. I guess I can't. I mean, if you've known my story enough, you know that I had a profoundly difficult experience in school, even to this day. And, there were great teachers in school. There were great people in school. But I also had the very difficult teachers and the very difficult experiences, especially at a place that no longer exists, which was Central Junior High School in Weymouth, Massachusetts. And I was happy to see that place has ceased to exist, because that was 3 years of living hell. And it took me years, and no, decades, to finally let go of the extreme anger and bitterness. And what does that letting go mean? It says, no, that's a whole period of time of I want my vengeance, and say, no, put it all in God's hands. And if God's vengeance is required, then let it happen. If not, let it not happen. And I suppose, granted, it's not necessarily a sign, but maybe the sign to some degree is that there is no Central Junior High School that exists anymore in Weymouth, Massachusetts. In my ninth grade, because it was junior high school was 7th, 8th, and 9th, it's now called middle school. In my ninth grade graduation picture, 18 of like 400 students are flipping the camera the bird. That's how difficult that school was. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. And, I gave kind of a thought, something that you might want to consider, where you have seen those experiences of we'll say, you don't take revenge or you don't take your action, but you see it happen. And usually it's in minor cases, but you've seen it on YouTube. You've seen the classic story of the karma cop. If you don't know what a karma cop is, you'll see them on YouTube. And it might be someone who is, acting erratically while driving and maybe cuts someone off. And, people get angry because it almost seems like they endanger someone. Then all of a sudden you see an unmarked car that turns out to be a police car flash its lights and pull the person down. Everyone goes, yes, a karma cop. That's great. It's a karma cop. Which means the person committed what it would appear to be an unseen action against someone else while driving, but turns out it was seen and the police saw him, and that's called the karma cop. Well, sometimes there will be events that happen in your life that you'll go, wow, that's kind of interesting that God took care of that situation. There's an expression in Catholicism where if someone is causing a lot of trouble and then all of a sudden something goes wrong in that person's life and they have to disappear, maybe leave the company or leave the parish or leave the, whatever it might be. And it might not be for a bad reason. It might be they got a better opportunity, but you're free of them. And we call that God took care of it. And that's one of the things, that God took care of it. Well, there was one of my favorite stories is when I was on a vacation. It was one of those couple days vacations, several days. I shouldn't say couple. It wouldn't make sense for 2 days. I went down to Cancun, and this was before 9/11, so you had these companies, and this was TNT Vacations. I don't know if they're still around. So it was several days in Cancun, and it was a good experience, and I enjoyed it. Now we're coming back, and this is in January or somewhere around there. So anyway, there is a major snowstorm in Boston, so our flight to return to Boston was delayed because there were delays in Logan, so we couldn't take off from Mexico until the plane was able to be received at the right time in Logan. So we were on the ground. It was delayed and everything else. And then finally we get on the plane. And I didn't complain because what the heck? I mean, you've got this major storm in Boston. And you don't want to land during the major storm. Well, there was a woman who sat in front of me in this plane. And I mean this as generically and just as generically as possible. She was a fairly attractive woman. Now, there's a reason why I'm saying that, because you know the old saying, beauty is only skin deep. Well, it definitely applied to her. She was, as we were talking early in the week about grumbling and whining, she's the biggest whiner I had ever seen in my life. And I'd never spoken to her. She's right in front of me. And all she kept saying, I hate this airline. Oh, this is awful. Oh, this is terrible. You know, that same grumbling that you saw, the type of grumbling that you saw in the reading earlier in the week. Oh, I hate this. This is terrible. Oh, why did constantly complain? And of course, as you know, that grates on you after a while. And I liked it. It was a charter airline. I forget the name of it, but it was great. They did a great job, the whole band. But I hate this and all. Well, suddenly, and I've told this story before. I don't know if anyone listening now has heard it. You know how on seats, like an airline seat, they have this little piece of fabric that is over the top of the seat, and it attaches to kind of like the back of the seat with Velcro. Attaches with Velcro. So this little fabric thing is there, and it attaches with Velcro, and it's probably there to prevent grease from your hair or whatever getting on the upholstery. So apparently this thing came loose, and she had long blonde hair that got caught in the Velcro. So now she's like, oh, what's this? And she's all complaining and she's all upset. Rightly so at this point. But of having listened to all this constant complaining, I'm sitting behind her, this constant complaining. All I'm saying is, you know, there is part of that little vengeance is mine type thing. There's that whole thing where, you know, someone stepped in, not of the physical world maybe, and made sure that something happened as a replacement for making everyone else have to listen to your miserable rantings. So, I mean, that's kind of an example of that vengeance is mine on a very low case. I had another situation happen to me recently. It was with a friend of mine. We went to a concert. And so we're at the concert, and we're sitting in seats 1 and 2 of our row. So this, and it was a jazz concert. It was kind of nice. And so this couple, you know, there were people that would come in and so we always have to stand up, let them come by the whole bit, the whole way. So anyway, this couple comes, and the woman very nicely asks us, you know, excuse me, we have to get by. But the guy looks at me or looks at us, and he flips his thumb up like, get out of your seat. Now, he didn't say anything. It just was the attitude. And I'm like, what a rude gesture. Just get out of your seat. That's the gesture he made. He didn't say anything, but that was the gesture. And I'm like, that's pretty rude. But I'm not going to say anything. And not because I'm afraid of saying some things. I've done that in the past. I have no fear of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time or the right thing at the right time. I've done it many times. But you also understand, there are certain battles that aren't worth fighting, and you don't fight over something that small, and you're at a venue, and you're with a friend, and you'd win the battle and lose the war. So I just let it go, obviously. I mean, what else was I going to do? But I'm saying, that guy's kind of obnoxious. And I mentioned to a friend of mine, did you see that little gesture? And he said, no, he just gave this gesture like, get out of here. So anyway, a few minutes later, someone comes in, and they're looking for their seat. And they happen to notice that someone is sitting in their seat. And who is sitting in their seat? The man and the woman, where the man from the couple was the one that gave us the rude gesture. So now they have to move because they're in the wrong seat. They don't even belong there. And so they have to, then they have to do the embarrassing thing of standing up and realizing that they are in the wrong seat. And the seat they ended up sitting in is nowhere near, it was in the same row, but nowhere near where they were. So I don't know how, maybe they don't read well. So anyway, and it was another one of those little things you say, sometimes just let it happen, and it just don't get into a big argument and stuff. And sometimes the Lord steps in and takes care of it. Granted, that's on minor details, but it can happen on major details. And remember, it's not our vengeance. Vengeance is God's. You just do what you're supposed to do, what is best for everyone in the situation. Let God handle it. And that's one of the powerful messages that we can remember. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Are you feeling overwhelmed, burdened by the challenges of life? Take a moment to find solace in the words of 1 Peter 5.
Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time.
In times of trial, remember the power of humility. Trust in God's timing, for he will lift you up when the time is right.
Cast all your anxiety upon him, because he cares for you.
Release your worries and anxieties unto the Lord, for he cares for you deeply. Find comfort in his loving embrace.
And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, shall himself perfect, establish, and strengthen you.
These are just a few verses from 1 Peter 5, offering you hope, encouragement, and guidance. Tune into the Bible, the source of everlasting wisdom.
Bible verses based on the American Standard Version.
Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. So next week is the holiest week of the year. It is going to be Holy Week, and we're going to look at all the readings for coming up next week. And, I often mention, because obviously I follow the first reading here, and I often mention that when we look at the Gospels, which I might do, I haven't figured out yet, Gospels, we happen to notice that the Pharisees are getting hardened of heart each and every day, and you will see that. And like I said, if you go to a Stations of the Cross, and you watch the Stations of the Cross, you look at it, you'll see that you can see the anger of the Pharisees. They're always grabbed, I don't know how you portray it, I guess that's the word, by the artists really well. So we're going to see that. And we're going to look at the theme and what it's all about. And this is the week where we recognize our salvation. So we'll be back next week, next Monday. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day.
Yeah. You know the real is back. Father Carr Chaplain from the city of champions, dropping daily reflections coming straight from the field. The raw truth revealed for the strong-willed. It's the Greatest Act of Defiance podcast with your host Father Carr, a message built to last. The Greatest Act of Defiance podcast. That's right, the Greatest Act of Defiance. Word up. Word up. Word up.
The The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.